This presentation focuses on the correct handling of the Straumann solid abutments. Solid abutments are suitable for cement-retained crown and bridge restorations. These abutments are available for soft tissue-level implants with a regular neck and wide-neck prosthetic platform. Solid abutments are color-coded to differentiate their height and the prosthetic platform they're used with. For the regular neck implants, these abutments come in 3 different heights. Yellow indicates 4 millimeters, gray 5.5 millimeters, and blue 7 millimeters height. For the wide neck implant, there are 2 abutment heights, green for 4 millimeters and brown for 5.5 millimeters height. The selection is made directly in the patient's mouth, according to the specific clinical situation. Solid abutments for implants with a regular neck prosthetic platform are inserted into the implant using a special solid abutment driver. The driver has a laser mark that indicates the correct position on the abutment. The mark must be aligned with the small groove in the abutment. Incorrect alignment can result in damage both to the abutment and to the instrument. Wide-neck solid abutments are placed with the SCS, or screw-carrying system screwdriver. The star shape of the screwdriver tip connects to the occlusal opening of the abutment for easy and precise insertion due to the system's secure pickup. For impression taking, white impression caps have to be used, together with positioning cylinders. These impression components are made of plastic. They're designed for single-use only and do not need to be sterilized. Positioning cylinders are color-coded the same way as the solid abutment for easy identification. Analogs are replicas of the implant shoulder with an inserted solid abutment. They have the same color code as their abutment counterparts. Solid abutments are inserted into the implant without cement. For the placement of abutments, the looped end of the assembled ratchet, together with the torque control device, is positioned over the driver handle. The directional arrow should be pointing clockwise towards the torque bar with teardrop. If it's not pointing clockwise, the arrow has to be pulled out, flipped over, and pushed back in. For stabilization, the pin end of the holding key is placed in the coronal hole on the driver handle. The holding key is held in one hand, and the finger of the other is used to pull the teardrop. The torque bar is moved to the 35 Newton-centimeter mark. After reaching the 35 Newton-centimeter mark, the torque bar is returned to its starting position. The holding key, the ratchet with the torque control device, and the driver are removed. The solid abutment is now in place and ready for the impression to be taken. Once the abutment has been tightened, it should not be removed. The impression cap is positioned over the abutment and is snapped onto the implant shoulder. The cap should be rotated slightly to ensure that it's properly seated. Next, the color-coded positioning cylinder is pushed through the impression cap. The internal flat side of the positioning cylinder should be aligned with the flat side of the solid abutment. The positioning cylinder needs to be pushed flush to the impression cap. The impression is then taken with an elastomeric impression material and sent to the laboratory. While the superstructure is being fabricated, the solid abutments need to be covered temporarily to ensure comfort and cleanliness. If the temporary restoration is simply a protective measure, protective caps are ideal. Temporary cement is applied to the inner part of the coping. This is then cemented onto the abutment and the implant shoulder. Before cementation, the SCS configuration of the wide neck solid abutments should be closed with cotton and sealing compound, for example, gutta percha. This allows access to the screw for later removal of the abutment. The caps are removed to make way for the final restoration. Provisional restorations must not be kept in the mouth longer than 30 days. An alternative to protective caps are temporary copings. The temporary copings are recommended to make the crowns and small temporary bridges for creating an ideal emergence profile. The temporary coping is snapped onto the corresponding analog, and the appropriate height is marked in accordance with the patient's status and the abutment used. The coping can then be shortened with its vertical retention rings serving as a guide. The margin of the temporary coping can be modified. The coping is snapped onto the implant shoulder, and the provisional restoration is created on the coping according to standard techniques. The retention rings provide proper mechanical bonding of the veneering material to the coping. The provisional restoration is removed and placed back onto the analog. The emergence profile of the coping and the restoration are then ground and polished to achieve an even profile. The lip of the snap-on mechanism is removed from the temporary coping by using the reamer or a handpiece with a rubber wheel. Removal allows excess cement to be extruded. The final restoration is then delivered by the laboratory. Before cementation of the final restoration, the SCS configuration of the wide-neck solid abutment should be closed with cotton and sealing compound, for example gutta-percha. This allows access to the screw for later removal of the abutment. After the cementation, any remaining cement is cleaned from the implant shoulder and gingival margin.